Hello and welcome to Big Bang Radio Spotlights. This is a show where we talk to independent artists from all around the world all about their music and their process for making it. I'm your host, Isaac Anderson, and today I get to sit down with the indie musician Darksoft. Without any further ado, here's the interview. Well, Darksoft, thank you so much for joining us today. We really do appreciate it. I want to start at the beginning of your musical journey, just like we do with all the other artists that we talk to on this show. So the first question right out of the gate, what is your earliest musical memory?
So one of my first musical memories is banging on African drums with my family, like in our living room. And we had, for some reason, my dad collected these African drums and marimbas. And then at night, like my sister and I and the family, we just like go to town and get really loud. And that was really fun. I came from a pretty musical family. Like my mom was a cello teacher from home. And so she was always having lessons. And we could always like hear that through the walls. So yeah, just a lot of good memories of the family being into music back in the day.
Do you remember the first time you actually sat down and wrote an original song?
You gave me these questions a little bit in advance, so I went through and I actually checked like when was the first song I'd written, and I'm pretty sure it was this thing in 2006, which is dating myself. So I've been doing this since then, kind of nonstop, just like writing songs and recording in my bedroom. And I think that first one, it sounded kind of like Ben Folds 5 on the keyboard piano. It was like, "What have you done? You took it all and changed it for the worse." It was terrible. It was like this vague love song. The lyrics didn't make sense. And yeah, I remember back then writing an original song and performing it was like very daunting, and I was super nervous. But I ended up like having bands come over into my garage, and we like put on this little event in the summer. And I think that was like the first show I ever organized, like right before high school. So yeah, I've been doing this for a while. And I think What Have You Done was the first like official song I wrote. Not proud of it, but maybe I'll dig it out one day.
Just in your mind, was there a moment that you knew that music wasn't going to be just a hobby, that this was going to be like your actual path?
It's hard to pinpoint an exact moment because it's kind of just always been there in the background of my life. Like I was playing piano when I was a kid, and trumpet in middle school, got into drums and was like playing in punk bands in high school and had a band in college. Always like was performing in some way. But I'd say what gave me the most confidence and like, you know, the idea of wanting to pursue it further was getting into the Sound Off Underage Battle of the Bands in Seattle, which is like this cool event that we got in, like my band, and it was just a really great like performance setup, and they did a lot of marketing around it. It gave us a lot of confidence to like try to pursue it further. And a lot of those people are still involved in this and still like cranking out new music and performing and stuff. I was also inspired learning how Dave Grohl just like completely recorded the entire Foo Fighters album himself. You know, he did the drums, guitars, voice, he wrote the songs. So knowing that, I was like, well, maybe I could like try that out too. And so I've kind of just always been like recording demos. And then in more recent years, I've been like taking the approach of like, okay, well, I'll produce them and like put them more into the world. So yeah, a lot of different inspirations over the years, and like interesting feedback and like thoughts on why to keep pursuing it, I guess.
When I hear your music, there's this awesome indie vibe going on, and there's also kind of this ambient glow to all the tracks. I feel like the name Darksoft really describes your music very well because it has all these kind of dark, enveloping things around the notes, but but it's also kind of got this soft indie energy that's going on. It's really awesome. I think it's definitely a vibe. And I'm just curious, when it comes to songwriting, how exactly does that go for you? I know you have the computer up behind you with a bunch of awesome looking tracks that we may or may not have heard. Like, I imagine you record everything yourself. Like, do you have a pretty rigid process of start to finish? Do you tend to be a little bit more easygoing with that? I don't know. How does that work for you?
It's a little different with every album. I kind of group things into albums. But lately, yeah, it's been more rigid. Like I like building a box and then putting myself in it. I like, having consistent instrumentation and like delivering a similar vocal delivery on every song. And Beigeification, I really went hard into this. Every instrumentation is nearly the same on every track. And I feel like having some sort of guidelines going into a project really helps it become more cohesive. Otherwise, like the world is your oyster and it could sound like a hodgepodge fusion of whatever. And that just kind of scares me. I like having direction going into a project. So I think starting with like a concept in mind and knowing your influences, like what you want to achieve, and then thinking about your listener. I try to do that more often too. Like what's the kind of person that might be into this? What music do they like? And maybe like our tastes match. And I like making music that I myself would enjoy listening to. And I just hope that other people might like it as well. I think that's the best way to go about it, really.
So how exactly does that work when you go about writing the lyric side of things? Like, are you a figurative person? Are you all about phonetics? Are you very literal? How does that work?
With Darksoft, I was like really inspired by very specific things. Like I was focusing on computer viruses and the weird dark web, trying to like get that down into some alternative rock, like lyricism. But with Beigeification, my recent album, I went a completely different route. I focused on like very common cliches and idioms that people say without even thinking about it. And I focused on this specific type of cliche. It's called a thought terminating cliche, which is like you'll say it at the end of something that just went wrong. It's like, yeah, what are you going to do? Or it is what it is, like win some, lose some. And there's something like defeating in that vibe, but it's also like an acceptance that I kind of needed to feel over the last couple years. Just having seen the world, like everything that's gone on and just some stuff in my personal life too. And so I felt like that's where my mind was. And so I focused on having every song kind of tie into that theme lyrically. So if you listen to it, you'll hear a lot of those kind of phrases. And I've just kind of made them my own, like co-opted this very generic, like kind of annoyingly cliche approach to lyrics in Beigeification.
You lived in Seattle for quite some time, and then you moved to Portland, Maine. How exactly is the music landscape there, and how has that area influenced your songwriting?
Yeah, Portland, Maine, it's a little thriving little scene here. I love the size of the city, for one. You've got venues like the Applehaitian, Sun Tiki, Space. I mean, for its size, there's a surprisingly like decent amount of quality music and art coming out of the little city here. And being in a new place it was pretty similar to Seattle. It's not that like geographically different. I mean, there's a little bit more snow. People talk a little differently. There's some accents, which I love. And like, there's lobsters, but when you go into a different location, you kind of have to like, I don't know, find common ground with people because you are new there. And maybe that's influenced me to write stuff that's a bit more like generic and maybe open to a wider audience, trying to get out of my shell a little bit more. I think it's all good. It's a really cool town. And I've been traveling back to Seattle to like do shows in these last couple of years, and I'm trying to get back out as well. But also expand, like check out New England, and there's some awesome venues and music towns around here. So yeah, it's been cool to like expand in that way.
Along with playing music, you also manage a record label. It's called Look Up Records. How exactly do you go about balancing and creating?
There's so much good music out there, and it just gets put online, but everything's so saturated that marketing it becomes like a full-time job. It's almost like you need 90% marketing to like 10% of actually creating stuff if people are going to listen to it. It's weird, right? So I kind of noticed this trend, and I I was like, well, maybe if I focus a little bit more on that side of it, I could like grow my music and maybe help other people's projects as well. So in like I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, I started Look Up and released a few artists from the Seattle area, like Sea Life, Swim, and basically balancing it all. Yeah, it takes an art form. I think like having a repeatable process that you can go through with every release and like having a checklist of things you want to do to help the release like get some legs beneath it is helpful to have. And then like I try to curate the sound that the label's putting out. I'm pretty selective of what gets put out through it, just because like we kind of maybe know where to place the music if it's like in a more niche genre, as opposed to like trying to do too many things and wear too many hats at once. So I think that kind of helps, just like having a focus for it.
Well, speaking about the roster on that record label, I want to talk about your new album. It's called BEIGEIFICATION. It's full of a lot of awesome songs. It's out now on streaming platforms for people to listen to. And what was the process of making that like? Did you record everything yourself in the space that you're sitting in? Did you have some things going on in your head that you just wanted to get out? How did that work for you?
I wanted to make something, like I said, that was like a little bit more straightforward, a little bit more listenable maybe. And I did a completely different approach to songwriting. I actually just like made sure I was repeating the same chord progression throughout the entire song, which in other iterations of my music, I would never do. I would like hop on to different chord progressions from section to section and like really change things. And I thought musically it was cool, but sometimes it's harder to listen to and like show people if it's like disjointed. So I really tried to like make things simple. I really try to simplify on this record and like have a very simple like beat on the drums and pull from more of like my 80s jangle pop loves of like music past, and kind of appeal to the tastes and styles that I think are maybe kind of popular with indie music right now. Yeah, does that kind of answer your question? I mean, for me, it's like a snapshot of my tastes right now in music and like what I want to put out into the world.
No, I think that's awesome. That perfectly answers the question. And the record is out now for people to listen to. It's on streaming platforms. You can go to your website, possibly get a physical copy.
Yeah, actually. So we partnered with this cool Olympia, Washington-based label called 2060 Records, and they made some tapes for it. So those are on the Bandcamp for Darksoft, as are some CDs. If you want some compact discs, if you like the 90s or the 80s, we got you covered. And then digital downloads are there on the Bandcamp as well. But yeah, like you mentioned, it's on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you listen to music.
Well, Darksoft, thank you again for joining us. But before you go, I have one more question. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen a Big Bang Radio spotlight before, but I'm a musician, but I also love film. And I believe those two worlds aren't too far away from each other, and musicians like you and I have a soft spot for it. So, before you go, what is your favorite movie?
I think the best movie that no one really talks about ever is The Fall. It's from 2006. It's like this surrealistic fantasy adventure film by Tarsem Singh. It's filmed without CGI, on location. It took years to put together. Cinematically, it's like a masterpiece. It got mixed reviews, but I've always loved it. So it's called The Fall. And it's kind of emotional. It's like set in the 20s and follows this character as he's kind of figuring out depression, and then this little girl kind of helps him through that. And yeah, I just think it's a beautiful story and really like artistic and creative too. But if I had to be something more general, I would choose The Matrix. Great action adventure. And shout out to Werner Herzog. I love the documentaries he produces as well.
Thanks to Darksoft for sitting down with us and talking all about his music. If you guys want to see more interviews just like this, you can find us online at Studio 67 NCC. Thank you all for watching. I'm Isaac Anderson, and until next time, stay lovely.